Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas Blue, and I'm an amateur magician. But years ago, I used to sit with Di Vernon at the Magic Castle, and I enjoyed 6 years of listening to Vernon talk about the gamblers. I was very intrigued by the gamblers. Di Vernon got to show me his dealing box, and that intrigued me further. And one of the people that I'll call him Di Vernon, used to talk about was Erdnase. When he was a young man, Vernon became an expert at the book The Expert at the Card Table, written by Erdnase. Anyway, a man by the name of Martin Gardner wrote an article for a men's magazine called The Murderous Gambler. And Martin Gardner hypothesized that a man by the name of Milton Andrews was really Erdnase. Erdnase spelled backwards is E.S. Andrews. Vernon disliked Martin Gardner's article tremendously. Even though he was a very, very good friend of Martin Gardner, he just couldn't stand the thought that Erdnase, his favorite author, was a murderous human being. Vernon and I would talk for hours about Erdnase. He'd show me everything that there was to know about the moves in the book. Eventually, this book is published. This is The Man Who Was Erdnase by Bart Whaley and Martin Gardner and Jeff Busby. Jeff Busby also had heard all the stories from Vernon and decided to do some research. And Jeff Busby and Bart Whaley in this book argue that Milton Andrews, a murderous gambler, was Erdnase. And over the years, other people have been named as candidates for Erdnase, but nobody really has a smoking gun. I'd like to put forward my candidate for Erdnase. My hypothesis is that Erdnase, spelled backwards, which is E.S. Andrews, really is this man, W.S. Andrews. And W.S. Andrews fits a lot of the criteria that Vernon once laid out to me. Vernon's had 3 criteria. 1, that Erdnase is going to be highly intelligent and highly educated. 2, that he would be English or Canadian, but he wouldn't be Australian, American, or New Zealander. Number 3, that he would be very creative in whatever endeavor he did. So, my candidate, W.S. Andrews, I believe fits all 3 criteria. Here's my argument. If you take the W and turn it sideways, it becomes E. And E.S. Andrews, spelled backwards, is Erdnase. And what, S.W. Erdnase to be exact. And Erdnase really didn't want to hide his name too successfully because Milton Andrews just doesn't fit this. And the other people have no names like Andrews. My candidate is W.S. Andrews, or better known as William Symes Andrews. The name is going to fit, and he's going to fit Vernon's criteria, the 3 criteria I just named. Here we go. Vernon said that he's going to be highly educated. Let me read to you from his obituary. William Symons Andrews, Edison pioneer, electrical engineer, and the oldest employee of General Electric, died at his home in Schenectady, New York. He was in his 82nd year, and his obituary is dated July 2nd, 1929. So this puts it he died 27 years after Expert at the Card Table was published. Mr. Andrews died in the Golden Jubilee of his connection with the General Electric Company, as well as his Jubilee year of Thomas Edison's incandescent light. The General Electric Company recognized his service to electric lighting as unbroken from the day he entered Edison's employee at Menlo Park. That fits the second criteria. Here's a man that, this fits the third criteria, that he is very creative. So creative that he could work for Edison and General Electric. Andrews was 7 months younger than Edison. He was born September 10th, 1847, at Salford, England. That fits the second criteria. Vernon said that he would either be English or Canadian. Turns out that he was born English and he immigrated to Canada. He attended Kuzners Collegiate Academy at Beckington near Bath, where he showed mechanical talents and a ready understanding of scientific and electrical matters. Upon graduating, he became an instructor in the academy, and so thorough was his scientific knowledge that at the age of 18 he became headmaster of the school, holding the position 10 years. So my candidate becomes headmaster of a boys' school in England, and he holds that position for 10 years. In 1874, he went to Toronto to enter the firm of Rayburn, manufacturer of firearms and sporting good accoutrements. Well, sporting good accoutrements is code for gambling equipment. 2 years later, he established a branch factory for the firm at Newark and was made superintendent. W.S. Andrews was 7 months younger than Mr. Edison. He was born in September 10th, 1847, at Salford, England. Well, right there is Vernon's second criteria. He's English, and he immigrates to Canada. He attended Kuzners Collegiate Academy at Beckington near Bath, where he showed mechanical talents and a ready understanding of scientific and electrical matters. Upon graduating, he became an instructor in the academy, and so thorough was his scientific knowledge that at the age of 18, he was made headmaster of the school, holding the position for 10 years. Eventually, he leaves this academy and goes to Canada. Well, I suspect that, and I offer this to the people that will follow me to investigate my candidate for Erdnase, that if you go to England and look this college up and possibly find some documents that would show that there was a scandal. This is what it sounds like. The people do not become headmasters of schools and then leave unexpectedly. No, I suspect what happened is there was a scandal, and more than likely the scandal was he got caught cheating. In 1875, he went to Toronto to enter the firm of Rayburn and Company, manufacturers of firearm and sportsman's accoutrements. Well, sportsman's accoutrements is code for gambling apparatus. 2 years later, he established a branch factory at the firm for the firm at Newark and was made superintendent. Well, Mason and Company had a manufacturing branch at Newark also. There were possibly the New York manufacturers were buying dealing boxes from the Newark plant. It's kind of what it sounds like. The Faro dealing box is a very complicated piece of apparatus. It's made like a watch, and so it would need a specialist in mechanics to deal with that. And so here's somebody that could do that kind of work. It was in November of 1879 that he entered the employ of Edison at Menlo Park, having read in the newspaper that Edison's invention of the electric light. The second S.W. Andrews hears about this new technology, the electric light. Boy, he flies off and enters the employment of Thomas Edison. He assisted in wiring the armature of Edison's first dynamo, constructed the first Edison chemical electric meter, made molds for carbonizing the filaments of the lamps, and finally small and delicate mechanisms for picking up the hair-like filaments and placing them between platinum clamps for mounting. Well, if you can manipulate hair-like threads of tungsten, which are the filaments, actually the electric lamps there were probably carbon thread, but they're still hair-like, and I would think that you would be capable of making dealing boxes in no time. Early in 1881, Mr. Edison conducted a test of 600 of his electric lamps. His entire force was keyed up to a high pitch of effort during the test, which Edison foresaw would decide the commercial efficiency of his lamp. Mr. Andrews' part was to watch the performance of certain control apparatus and regulate it as required. On that occasion, he worked for 50 hours without sleep. So here's a man that's integral to the electric lamp of Edison. On October 1881, Mr. Andrews was made superintendent of the testing department at the Edison Machine Works in New York. On June 1st, 1883, he became chief electrical engineer of the Central Station Construction Department of Edison Electric Light Company, and he established more than 30 local Edison generating stations in the next 3 years, including those at Sunbury, Pennsylvania, the first Edison 3-wire station in the United States. Well, I think that takes care of Vernon's number 3 criteria, that the man is very creative. Mr. Andrews went to Schenectady in 1894 to enter General Electric's employee. From 1897 to 1903, he engaged in X-ray testing, taking out a number of patents on methods of regulating X-ray tubes. He was also interested in illumination by phosphorescence and fluorescence. Possibly the X-rays led to his death. So I don't know. Somebody should look up his death certificate, see if he died of cancer, because being in charge of that stuff in those days could kill you. He was a fellow of the American Institute of Electrical Engineers and of the Illuminating Engineer Society, and a member of the American Society for the Advancement of Science, the National Electric Light Association, and the Franklin Institute of Philadelphia. He also was a member of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania and the Edison Pioneers. So let me lay out my argument again. W.S. Andrews, spelled backwards, is S.W. Erdnase, except the W has become an E. He turns it sideways. Vernon's criteria, that he would be highly educated, that he would be English or Canadian, and that he would be very creative. Number one, he is highly educated enough to become the headmaster of a boys' school for technical training. Number two is that he is born in England and he immigrates to Canada. Why did Vernon think that he was English or Canadian? It was because of the words that appear in Expert at the Card Table. For instance, one of the words that appears is disabuse, and this was not a common word used by the Americans or the Australians. In fact, it's really used by scientists and lawyers only in America at that time. There were other clues in the words of Erdnase in the Expert of the Card Table, but I leave that to my predecessors to investigate. How did I find out about Erdnase? Well, early in my magic career, I was collecting books, and one of the first books that I came across is this book, Magic Squares and Cubes by W.S. Andrews. It was first published in 1908. There is a second edition of 1917, and it's published by the Open Court Publishing Company, which still exists. This book, I've gone through looking for clues in the way he narrates the book, but he's fastidious in the way he describes how to do things, kind of like the way a magician would describe how to do a trick. But I didn't see anything that was a major clue. But one of the major clues is that he probably was an amateur magician, and I would think that Erdnase alone wrote the magic section for Expert at the Card Table. And this is the second edition, and this is the way they displayed on my bookshelf right in front for years. And everybody would come by and look at my magic book collection, and no one ever tumbled to or asked me about Andrews right in front of them. I always wondered why no one was ever curious about it. I suspect what it was is the second they saw magic squares, the magicians turned off. You had to be a mathematician to be interested in it. In The Man Who Was Erdnase by Busby, he tries to show that the magic section was really written by somebody else, and Andrews just was copying it in, but I don't think so. I think he really was describing tricks that he knew how to do and were capable of using some of the gambler's sleights for. I think the book is wholly written by W.S. Andrews. Now that I've shown you my evidence, hopefully there will be others to do some more research. You can find the article on W.S. Andrews as an obituary in the New York Times dated July 2nd, 1929. It'd be this article with this picture. Everybody's grandfather. The things that need to be researched is what happened at the school that he became headmaster of and then abruptly left after 10 years. Possibly there's something in the death certificate about cancer and his x-ray experiences. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you have seen my evidence, and I thank you for watching.